Welcome back to the Poor Sports Podcast. This is a big week for us.
Big week.
We took a week off in case no one noticed.
I got literally zero complaints about it.
We
got one on Twitter.
I saw some people asking if there would be a show, which there was not because you had big news.
Well, you want to blame my recently born child, but truly, I had a time ready, and you said, "Can we push to the next week?" Not to call you out.
It's true.
I was ready to go, ready to record, ready to escape that child, to abandon and neglect that child, and you. I definitely narrowed the time frame quite a bit. Normally we have like kind of a 2-day window where it's like we can try to find, and I had like a 3-hour stretch that I had agreed on with my wife.
Yeah, there was a very narrow point for us to record.
Yes.
And it didn't work out for me. So it was better to just move these things along. And I saw you were already back doing comedy last week, though. So.
Yeah, that was a point of contention in my house.
I'm not surprised it's a point of contention. I was more surprised you were out doing the comedy.
Let's talk about what we're going to talk about, and then I'll tell the story because I want to get to a very serious thing before we do that. But what are we going to talk about? And leave that one thing that says don't talk about it out if you can, and I'll start with that.
Okay. You want to run through it? I don't have.
Oh yeah, that's fine. So basically we're going to talk about my big news. There was huge Supreme Court news that I think nearly everybody involved is getting the point wrong. Not to say that I agree with or disagree with the decision, but I think that people are classically biased opinions. We're going to talk about the Nathan's hot dog eating contest. We also have NBA draft on here. I don't know if I added that or if you added that or if you.
I did not.
Okay, so I think we'll talk a little bit about the NBA draft and NBA free agency. That was so long ago and
Clearly
so little sleep ago.
We're very prepared to talk about it, as you can tell. We don't know how it ended up on the sheet. And,
exactly. Ghost put it on the sheet.
Experts here.
Yeah, and then the Mariners fan base seemed to have a week of really acute meltdowns that I want to talk to you about because I don't fully understand it. But before we get started, I do want to talk about something serious. On a previous episode, I had talked about a person who I was in a comedy contest with who cheated. And that person, we are very cool now, and a very, very sad thing happened in her life. So this is to give the story. Her mom died suddenly it was actually it was Sunday, the day after we had our daughter. I think it was the Sunday that we were leaving to come home, whatever day. It was the same weekend as we had our daughter. Died suddenly of a heart attack, which is tragic on its own, but I got to turn myself down quite a bit. That would be tragic enough on its own, but to add to the tragedy, 6 years prior, this woman, her name's Rachel Halfjay, her sister died, leaving a 1-year-old daughter, and her mom was the guardian essentially from age 1 until 7 of her sister, of her niece, and now Rachel and her husband Richie, who are both comedians, are guardians of their niece. I mean, overnight parents, and these are folks who they've been guests on my podcast, the Nobody Likes Casey McLean podcast, to talk about they've had years of fertility struggles, and I think to a degree had kind of given up on having a kid, and then were basically forced into parenthood through just an unimaginable tragedy and are going through unimaginable stress. They have a GoFundMe set up. I mean, as you will soon find out, having a kid at any age, frankly, is very expensive. It creates quite a strain on your budget. And when you're two people that did not have that in your plans, and you also have to plan a funeral and, deal with the grief of a 7-year-old. Well, so my uncle died recently, and my daughter is aware of my uncle, but she doesn't she wasn't incredibly close with him or anything. And we just haven't told her. She's in the dark about the fact that my uncle Bob died. When you're this having to do one of the hardest parenting jobs on day one of parenting to help process the grief of a 7-year-old child, also very difficult. So they have a GoFundMe. There's also, I'll put her Venmo, because I started to do GoFundMe, and I got very annoyed with the GoFundMe interface. I get very I've almost donated to so many people. GoFundMe is actively taking donations away from people, so I just sent her a Venmo because I knew her from comedy. I knew her Venmo from like paying her for comedy before. But so absolutely unimaginable tragedy. This is a local comedian. If you live in the Seattle area, if you want to help, if you care about comedy, if you care about people, it's like and care about local people. Very, very difficult situation, obviously. I
think we can probably post that link and the Venmo maybe with when we put out this podcast.
Yes, absolutely.
Good combo of things. It's always really tough. You always see people on social media. If you're just scrolling through Twitter, you will see all sorts of causes that people are trying to raise money for, and to the point where it can get like exhausting at times, where you feel like it just feels like too much. I would say that among the possible types of things someone could endure that necessitates raising some money, this has to be near the top. This is just like, it's a lot. It's a lot for one person to deal with. So
well, and
I think it'll be.
I forgot a couple things actually when in the haze of sleep deprivation. Her husband Richie lost his job a couple months ago, and she broke her wrist and required surgery about 3 weeks ago. So it's been, just a brutal stretch for these folks. And they live in Tacoma also, by the way. They're good people. So I agree. About as noble a cause, about as unarguable a cause. It's a kid, it's a funeral, it's two people who've been foisted into parenthood unexpectedly, and absolutely a worthy cause. I agree with you completely. Very often I see GoFundMes and I'm like, all right.
And the other thing I would add too is, anytime someone's like raising money on a GoFundMe or anything where they just need some help, I think people feel like if I don't give a certain amount of money, then it's not going to be good. And I don't think that's the case at all.
Sure.
If you can spare a couple dollars, that helps. That definitely helps. And I understand it's like, hey, if it's somebody you don't know, somebody you've never interacted with, it can be hard to like pull the trigger on something like that. But it's like my theory that people will pay $5 to $10 for any sort of subscription without any thought, right? We do that all the time. That's our grand plan for this podcast one day. People will pay $5 to $10 for anything, so they don't care about that money, right? It's money that they're going to throw away anyway. Well, you can put it to good use somewhere, and even $5 to $10 is going to help somebody in a situation. So, good cause for sure.
Let me have you do one thing. Can you tap that microphone? I don't think you're talking through your microphone. I think the audio is through your computer.
Oh no.
Do you want to we can reopen if you want.
No, we're not reopening. It doesn't sound that bad. It's just a slight disrespect to the tragedy befallen AFJs. And
way to go.
Yeah, some of us respect people who are going through a lot, and some of us don't. But let's talk about. We should talk about my thing, because I was supposed to be opening for Nate Craig all weekend at the new Tacoma Comedy Club location, the much anticipated Tacoma Comedy Club location, and I was going to be headlining the Sunday. Not unbeknownst to you maybe and the folks listening, but it was possible that I was going to use that weekend, record all the shows, and piece together like some type of a special out of that. And I got one show and a show.
Hopefully it was a good one.
It was, what's funny is it was a show where I thought that there were going to be people in the audience who've seen me a lot of times. And I was like, well, I better do the new material. No, and my sister was, and her fiance, her husband, he's been upgraded to husband. They were there, and I was like, well, I got to do material they haven't seen before. So I didn't even get recorded a lot of the material that I wanted to get recorded. Anyway. And that night, me and Nate Craig, we have a couple drinks after the show, and then we go down. He was friends with the guy, Ryan Sickler, who was headlining down at Tacoma Comedy Club, the downtown location. We go watch his late show, and I was like, they're close to the hotel. He can walk. I gotta go. I'm tired. I want to be rested for the show tomorrow, and so I leave. And I'm walking out. I'm 1 minute out of the club, walking across the street to my car, and I get a text from my wife. I think my water broke.
Oh my gosh!
And I'm
luckily you're close to home. That's
yes.
Thankfully you're not doing a show an hour away or something, like some of those shows that you do. You were within the vicinity of your house, which is very important in times like that.
Yeah, and that's by design. And the last time we had a kid, I stopped doing comedy on June 30th, and she was born August 6th.
Yeah.
This time we were going to keep that window a little narrower. We didn't realize it was going to be less than a day. We were trying. She was due 3 weeks. She came 3 weeks early, or like a little over, or almost 3 weeks early, which is just so everyone knows is not like in a scary range. There's no. It's considered basically full term or just short of full term. She was a little smaller than our other daughter, but like way bigger than the average 37-week-old kid.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's totally healthy, totally fine. But yeah, my wife texts me and I go back and I've had like 3 drinks and I'm exhausted. And she's like, my wife is like she's like, I think my water broke, but I don't know. And it's actually really uncommon for women's water to break before they start feeling contractions and shit like that.
Yeah.
And so like in the movies, a bucket of water gushes out of a woman and that's how she knows she's going into labor. That's rarely the case. For my wife, it's not. Her water broke. It's not completely clear though, because it's not like that. It's not like a bucket of water gushes out of her. And so she was like basically just laying in bed worrying. And I was like, listen, I'm exhausted. Can I like sleep for a little bit while you make this decision?
This is real second kid energy that you guys have right now. First kid, you'd already be at the hospital.
You know what's fucked up is the first kid we had just bought new cars in preparation for the kid. Yeah. She's like, I think my water broke. And I was like, fuck, I got to go get the new license plate from the dealership. So I went and got the new license plate from the dealership and then came and got her. So we've had, in both cases, we've taken it very casually, but in both cases, she wasn't like contracting or anything like that.
So did you get like a good night's sleep and then go the next morning?
I got about 2 hours of sleep and she woke me up and she's like, I think we should go. I think my water did break. And so we, it's like 3 a.m. We text my mom, but she comes over. It's like, we didn't even, it was 3 weeks early. So and my wife is a teacher. She had just got off of school. She'd literally been off of school for 1 day.
It was early enough that you probably didn't have a lot of conversations with people about like the game plan when the baby arrives, because you and I hadn't even really had any conversations about, not that we have to, I mean, our podcast is much more casual than that, but we hadn't even talked about like, okay, what's it going to look like when you have the kid and after you just had the kid. Just had the kid.
Yeah, she really barged into our lives. And so we also didn't have like the go bag packed or any, I mean, like you said, it's a lot less stressful when you're having a second kid. The biggest thing is you're like, how are we going to dealing with the first kid? Like, wow, because it's a long process. It's scary to be in the delivery room. We didn't want her to be in the delivery room. So my mom came. I'm going to sneeze pretty soon. Oh, it's not happening. I hate the idea that people are watching my face when I'm about to sneeze. It's got to be the closest thing to a disgusting orgasm face when
you've got the sneeze blue balls.
Yeah.
Just the worst.
Anyway, so my mom comes and gets her. We go to the hospital, and then again, the second kid thing rears its ugly head. We show up, and when you show up in the middle of the night, they're doing like triage, basically going like who's the most in need of care. So you go through the ER at Tacoma General. By the way, shout out to Tacoma General. A great experience there overall. Show up at the ER, then you get to the triage area, and they're like, well, you guys are second parents. There's no contractions, or second time parents, no contractions. You had a healthy birth the first time. You're not in a scary range. We are like the bottom of the list of priorities, basically. So we spend another like couple hours just waiting to be like, confirm that my wife is in labor, because they have to confirm before they admit you. But if your water has broken, they'll never send you home. You have to stay there.
I get that. You know what hospitals, what they need? I've been thinking about this a lot. They need the buzzers like the restaurants have.
Yes.
Or the text system where like you go to a restaurant, you give them your phone number, they say, all right, we'll text you or call you when your table's ready. And you just go walk around, right?
Yeah.
Hospitals need that too. And you guys live close enough to the hospital that you could have gone in, give them your phone number, go back home, wait for the text, and then come back when it's time. Like, why can't we do that? We can do that.
Well, I think a common thing that happens if the water has not broken is you'll go in and the contractions are like not very close together. And they'll be like, come back when this is the spacing. But when your water breaks, I guess it's like basically a huge infection-prone wound, essentially.
Sounds great.
Yeah, it sounds like a blast. I'm really, really thrilled that I'm not the one that has to do it. So anyway, it takes a while to get in, and then because the water break situation, they don't do a lot of checking. What you'll hear a lot about with labor is dilation and whatever, like the cervix being effaced. And we didn't get a lot of updates on that. By the way, I got my mother-in-law like, give me some updates. You're like not updating us enough. And I'm like, there's literally nothing. We've been sitting here for 12 hours. We've slept 4 different times because nothing is happening. My wife took multiple baths. Like it's nothing is happening. And then she starts texting my wife, and I'm like, you gotta stop texting. You can't text. Like, you gotta leave her alone. Let her
I've
concentrate.
seen this go down with my brother when my niece was born, and from a learning perspective, we realized that when our child is born, we're probably not going to tell anybody until the very end.
Sure.
Like we'll go to the hospital on our own. We're not going to update anybody. We're going to kind of go through the entire process. We'll either wait until like we know it's about to happen, or possibly even after after my wife delivers.
Yeah.
Before we tell anybody, because man, the most annoying thing when you're already going through a very stressful time, the two of you going through the delivery of a baby, but then when you factor in all these people who want to be involved in it, but really have no way of being involved, I mean, they just kind of take out their stress on you and just compound what's going on.
Yes. And one of the problems that we have, it's the second child problem again, is we're relying on these people for childcare during this.
Yeah, that's the difference between first kid and second kid, right? Second kid, you're going to have to let somebody know because they got to come watch your first child.
Yeah, we're trying to coordinate and all that stuff. And so it was, and then the other thing is, like, it's pretty unusual for someone to go into labor and then not feel a contraction for like 15 hours.
Yeah.
And then, my wife would have like small cramps. And then when it happened, kids born, all that. And, everything's good. I don't think there's a lot of... The other thing is, I think that your brain biologically makes you forget all the shit from the delivery. So there's like, I was like, I'm going to remember these nurses' names and I'm going to write them a thank you note. And now I'm like, fuck, I can't remember a single one of these people. I remember there was...
ultimate, like, in the moment thing. I mean, we've all been there. Even if you haven't had a kid, you can be out and just like getting lunch somewhere and be like, that's the best service I've ever had.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write a very positive letter to this person's boss, and then you get home and you're like, it wasn't that great.
Yeah, you're like, it certainly wasn't worthy of me putting in extra effort. And in this case, I'm sleep deprived. So yeah, things are, I will say it's like significantly less stressful than the first one in all ways. Even with, I mean, our first daughter is, creates a little bit of extra stress, and it's another person who you have to think about and it's a person who's somewhat unruly because she's not even 4 years old yet. And so it's hard to be like the other day, she's like, well, why does baby sister get to stay up and I have to go to bed? And I'm like, I wish this fucking kid would go to sleep. I don't want her to stay awake either. Like
if you can get her to go to sleep, then you both go to bed at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
Problem solved.
Yeah. And we have, and this is something that I think is like, may sound somewhat elementary, but it's been very successful for us. And this is not to give you unsolicited parenting advice, but anyone out there, this works for my wife and I, is I'm a night owl. My wife is like, she sleeps like a cat. She needs like 12 hours of sleep a day. If we had no kids, my wife would sleep 10 hours a day. No doubt in my mind. So I'm like already up till 11 or midnight every night anyway. And she's already wants to go to bed at 8 or 9 o'clock PM anyway. And so what we're doing right now, and this is going to sound like a meager amount of sleep until you try to do something different and realize. So my wife goes to bed at 8, and then I am fully in charge of the newest kid of our baby daughter until 1 a.m. And I'm expected to keep her out in the living room. Yeah. My wife gets 5 hours of uninterrupted sleep. Then I bring her into the bedroom, and then it's my wife's on duty. And so she gets the 1 a.m. By that time, normally my daughter has she has like a little bit of a witching hour thing around 9 p.m. the other day, my wife went to bed, and my daughter, our newborn daughter, immediately she went from like sleeping peacefully to she shits her diaper. I go to change her diaper. I wipe her completely clean, throw it away. I turn back and she is unloading a full shit into the changing table. And then I clean her, put her new diaper on, throw the changing table in the washer, set her in her like pack and play, the like living room thing that's like kind of like a crib. She immediately just projectile spits up across it. And it was like the whole sense of peace shattered the moment my wife went to sleep.
Yeah. No, I get it, man. It's I'm looking forward to it myself. But now you got me. I mean, not that, 3 weeks early technically really isn't early, but now it's got me accelerated on my own timeline in my head, right? I'm like, all right, we're 9 weeks out. And I'm like, but it could be 6. We got to be ready to go by like 6 weeks out.
Well, yeah, my other daughter was born 4 days late, and I got to tell you, I am so thrilled that this kid came out early, because especially, considering that she's healthy and all that, to put the shit that we have to pretend like I didn't mean at the beginning and to make all the annoying people happy. My wife is like back to being an adult woman again, and not just this like tired, barely scraping by her existence person. You know what I mean? She's like, she's like vibrant and like she's productive and she's happy and she's rested and she's not just exhausted all the time. And we've gone out drinking and like we've done a lot of the shit already that like she can't do during pregnancy. I could do a lot of it, but she couldn't. It was also, by the way, it wasn't great to be like, not only am I exhausted, but I've had like 3 drinks. I don't know if I should be dry. I don't know if they're going to be thrilled when we show up to the emergency room and you can smell whiskey on my breath. So I should probably sleep for I was not drunk. I will like, one thing is I made sure to never be over the legal limit at any point, because I knew this was possible. But it still isn't a great look when you're like, I was out drinking and this lady went into labor. You know what I mean?
Not that there's ever really a point where you're completely ready. Like, no one's just sitting at home and it's very convenient and you get to go to the hospital and have a smooth birth, right? It's always going to come up as a surprise. But as far as like sleep deprivation and tiredness goes, you were probably in a terrible situation. I mean, it's the end of a very long day. You've been doing things. You've been out. I mean, everybody knows how you feel at the end of a night when you have made the decision to leave a bar. Not that you're shutting it down. It's not that the bar closed and now you have to go home. You are actively choosing to go home because you're tired and the party's still technically going. And that's the position you were in. And then you're on your way to the hospital.
And then here's 24 hours of limited sleep. I will say, again, Tacoma General, they have these like fold out beds. The place that my wife delivered our first daughter, I literally got about 2 hours of sleep after she got the epidural on a bench. Like, it was a hard surface, no pillow, no blankets. That was terrible. This had each room, the delivery room and the recovery room, both had full like pull out couches basically. So nice. I probably got like 4 hours of sleep in the hospital, that's pretty good, man. It was much needed in that circumstance also.
Sure.
And my wife slept a fair amount also, because again, it's like I can't even begin to describe how little was happening, how boring it was for the first 15 hours.
I mean, I know the times can vary, but how long did this take from like the moment you guys got to the hospital till the delivery occurred?
So moment we got to the hospital was like 4 a.m. and the delivery was like 10 p.m. But labor was about 23 hours.
Yeah.
But that's when I'm sure you've learned a lot more about this in the last couple months than you knew before. But when you thought of labor, I always thought labor meant like pushing.
It's because here's the thing, man.
Movies
I feel like well, it's movies and TV, and like even people who tell you, how long they were in labor, they will always dramatize it. They make it, I mean, not to diminish what's occurring here. It's a lot. It's called labor for a reason. But you're led to believe it's like, when your parents or grandparents will tell you we used to walk 3 miles in the snow uphill both ways. It's like, well, sort of, and that's the thing with labor. It's like, you're told 23 hours of labor, and you just assume someone is just like sweating and fighting and like really going through it that entire time. But then you learn as an adult, or when you're about to have kids, labor is mostly just kind of sitting around, and then towards the end it gets very strenuous. But it's not like all 23 hours are like this grueling exercise often.
Yeah. Also, so my wife, and I'm not trying to cast any judgment on any women. Also, I did another thing. I don't feel bad about it at all, but I mansplained pregnancy to your wife a couple weeks ago, or a little over a month ago now, I think. And that's another thing that bugs me, is when people are like, oh, pregnancy is actually like 10 months. And I'm like, well, they're like, because it's 40 weeks.
Yeah.
But a month isn't 4 weeks. A month is 30 to 31 days.
Yeah.
Which means it's 4.5 weeks, which 4 months is 9 months is 39 weeks. Anyways.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things you learn, man. I mean, the thing about like due dates are a complete estimate. Like if you don't, like there are people that can pinpoint exactly when they conceive their child. And in doing that, I'm like, well, like clearly you're not having sex a lot. And like if you can pinpoint that, like I'm not saying like everyone's out here just banging away, but like you kind of estimate like about the point where you thought your child was conceived.
A lot of times people can tell when the conception happened because that was the only time they ever had sex with that person before the child was born. So
well, that's true. But like if you're in like a marriage or a partnership, you know, a lot of times you're kind of estimating about when the child was conceived. And so by estimating, it means the due date in and of itself is an estimate, but you know, it could totally be reasonable that your daughter wasn't 3 weeks early at all. And that was when she was supposed to be born, or right about, you know, and that's the same thing with any delivery due date. So it's like when you're,
well, here's the problem, Alex, is they don't actually measure it from there. They measure it from the last missed period. Also from the last period. I mean, so it's all fucking bullshit. It's the whole thing is a lie.
Yeah. I mean, it's like when you start thinking about your plans around the time that your child is going to be born, right? Like you think about, okay, I'm going to probably be going on work leave if you have that sort of thing, you know, and you got to kind of,
what are you saying, motherfucker?
If you have a job,
if you're not a fucking loser,
all the things you schedule out. And then of course, as the due date approaches, people like treat that date like it's written in stone, you know, like it seems like as you talk to people about childbirth, they really lean on the due date. And it's like, well, you know, that it could be that day, or it could be, you know, 2 weeks earlier, 2 weeks after that, or who knows, you know, like it can kind of be all over the place. So
I got to come home the second day of my daughter's life and like try to like very quickly set up like a makeshift everything we needed.
I mean, you didn't really have the time to prepare that most people do. I feel like we'll be in the same situation. The last month will be a lot of putting things together, organizing things. And there's always the possibility that you might not be done with those things when the time comes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, you know, you're healthy people. It'll probably be fine no matter when it comes. That's the biggest thing, is like, you know, the coming too early, or like you would know if there were health complications already, probably, because it's also like insane how the thing that I will say I appreciate more, or feels more insane or magical to me after going through it, especially I'm in a very near aftermath of it, but I remember it the first time also, is the fact that like cavemen did this. Like we have millions of dollars worth of equipment in here. My wife has an epidural that, by the way, barely made it in time. Like it was right in the nick of time that thing kicked in. There's, you know, everything is sterile and everybody's washing their hands and wearing gloves and hair nets and masks. And it's like a whole, like everything is very cautious. And then you're like, yeah, some fucking dude next to a fire with a club also did this. Like and like they didn't, like I cut an umbilical cord with a sterile, can you imagine the first person, like if you're a caveman and you've never seen a live birth, and you can't imagine this because you kind of are this person now, but when you like see an umbilical cord, like what the fuck am I supposed to do with this? Like she's still tied on, you know? The fact that we've been doing this for thousands of years just is absolutely mind blowing when you go through it.
Yeah, I would say it's kind of like with anything else. You have to really put things in perspective and think of like the most average people you know. Think of the most average people you know. you're probably better off than most of those people. And
Sure.
if you think about that, 50% of people are better off than them, and 50% of people are worse off than them, and kind of use them as a barometer. I mean, chances are you're probably going to be a good parent. Not you personally, but really anybody who's listening. Like, it's going to be hard to screw this up, even if you think you're doing a really bad job. If you're even doing any prep ahead of time, then you're probably doing better than the average person.
Yeah, that's fair. It's funny you even took it to good parenting, because I was like, I'm thinking more of like the actual medical emergency that's occurring in the room.
Oh yeah,
and they didn't have doctors. What do you have, like a shaman back in the like you like what you had a small village, and you're like, I hope one of these people's an OBGYN, you know. It's
the help was a lot different back then, I'm sure.
Yes, yeah.
Not as tailored to the moment. But it's I mean, an exciting time, I'm sure. I would imagine you're probably not sleeping well. I would imagine that going and doing comedy so quickly was an escape.
Yeah. So that was that's right. We glossed over it earlier. So I had those shows on my calendar already. And if my daughter had been born just about any later, it would have been more difficult. But like I said, we have a system. We have our family lives close. Like it's the Puyallup Fair shows, and I was driving another comedian there. She was on those shows also. She needed to get back to the club, so there was no opportunity to like hang out at the Puyallup Fair. So it was going to be like a 3-hour end-to-end thing, and still it was a point of contention, but it wasn't like this was driving to Spokane, spending the night or anything like that. And they were on my calendar already, and I was like, I already lost 3 shows, one being perhaps what would have been the biggest show, like the most important show to me the whole year, the show headlining, which is absolutely worth it. I didn't try to make my wife hold my daughter in. It was absolutely worth it. I mean, I was the club owner and the managers there were some of the first people I texted, because I wanted to make sure they had enough time to replace me. But those were very important shows to me, and I was like, can I just go do this? Because it's like, I just feel like if I don't do it's going to be a while. I don't have anything on my calendar right now until July 27th. I'm going up to Oak Harbor, and that is going to be like a long drive. It's going to end up being like a 5-6 hour day of travel to get there and back. And so yes, they were a point of contention. Also, they were at the Taste Northwest, which is formerly called the Taste of Tacoma, which used to be at Point Defiance Park, and now it's at the Puyallup Fairgrounds.
Yeah, we were actually considering going to that.
Sure.
This past weekend. It didn't necessarily coincide with your show. It just seemed like a fun event to do. But Point Defiance Park, very nice and beautiful. The Puyallup Fair, when I think of the fairgrounds, I think of the smell of pigs and horses and cows. Not as nice. I understand that a fairground is obviously very well equipped to handle something like that, but just from a scenic, like Point Defiance is so scenic, and the park is so nice by contrast. Like it's kind of unfortunate that it got moved.
It is. Also, I will say the pigs and cows and stuff don't live there year round, so you weren't smelling horse shit all day or anything like that. One thing that I will say is I found out I needed to be like family friendly clean as we entered the parking lot. I was not aware of that.
Okay. And why was it a family show? Well, I guess it's all ages, because it's everyone there. There's no age limits like you would have at a bar or a brewery or something like that.
They said like PG-13, but I was doing the show I was doing, that I headlined one, and then I opened for Mary Santora on another one. And headline was kind of a misnomer, because all the shows were 30 minutes long, which they were not aware of. They probably wouldn't have booked me to open for her had they known that, but they thought it was going to be like 20 minutes and 30 minutes or 15 and 30 minutes.
They already know that you go long, so they...
Yes, they know that. So anyways, the show that I was headlining, I was doing jokes, and I watched people like... There were like dark... I have very few jokes that I think are truly family friendly. I have some jokes that I technically don't swear in, but they're pretty dark. And I was watching because a bunch of kids walked in with their parents, like as I was approaching those jokes. And I only have a limited arsenal of jokes that I can do that are like not sexual. There's no swearing. And I was like, well, these kids are going to hear these dark jokes. And the kids were laughing harder than the parents.
Okay, that's good. I would also say, like, as a parent, if you're bringing your kid into that, you have to know what you're bringing them into, right? Like,
Sure.
It's like as a parent, when you make the conscious choice to let your kid watch R-rated movies, like with your knowledge, right? Like they might like happen to see one and not tell you, and that's one thing. But if you're bringing your kids in, you have to understand this stuff might not be like the most PG stuff you've ever heard.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, at least that's how I'd like to justify talking about shaking babies in front of about 8-year-olds. But they were laughing really hard, so they were into it. I filmed it. I don't know if there's a couple clips that I might get out of it, but it's like it was a very unique experience that I have not had before. And also, I was impressed with myself being able to do 25 minutes of just squeaky clean, no swearing. Probably not going to be on dry bar anytime soon, but to be able to do 25 minutes without swearing and not do, I used to have like 15 minutes of jokes that I don't do anymore that I could do not swearing. I don't do those jokes anymore, so I didn't do those jokes that day. But it's like I'm getting close to the point where I could actually probably do 45 minutes without swearing. Not what I want to do on a regular basis, but if the paycheck is right, you know.
Now you know how Bill Cosby feels.
Yeah, in every way. In every way.
All right, we should probably get into some of our topics today.
Sure. Well, so it was the 4th of July this weekend, and we had some drama around the Nathan's hot dog eating contest.
Was there drama? I didn't. I assumed Joey Chestnut won. It's actually I used to kind of like tune into the hot dog eating contest because it's somewhat entertaining. But in the Joey Chestnut era, there's really no reason to do it. He wins every year.
So it's interesting you said, so one, the drama was that it originally got weather delayed. Okay. And then it got canceled. The event got canceled, and then Joey Chestnut came out like Ken Griffey Jr. personally removing moving suitcases or luggage or whatever from the moving trucks to Tampa Bay. He is that the story, or was it the Seahawks that were like headed out? There was like actually moving trucks on site. That was
the Seahawks. The Seahawks. Yeah, they actually moved them down to California, and then they had to drive back.
Yeah, I think there's something apocryphal about Griffey too. Like obviously Griffey saved the Mariners in Seattle, but Joey Chestnut came out and was like, "We're gonna fucking do this," and then they brought it. They put it back on. Joey Chestnut won his 16th mustard belt. Ate 62 hot dogs. I did see like the tail of the tape. It was like 18,000 calories and this many carbohydrates. And yeah,
they love to total it up, man.
Yeah.
They love to tell you exactly how much was consumed here.
It was
detail.
So I didn't watch it. It's very fun as an event. I do agree there's no parody, which is a problem. I have a small connection to Joey Chestnut because I went to a journalism conference in college. And they did this thing about this award-winning article in whatever, like San Francisco. I was in San Francisco, and it was in like a San Francisco newspaper. Sure. And it was about Joey Chestnut. So I've always but there wasn't parody before. I don't know what era. I don't know what. Listen, this is like LeBron versus Kobe. It used to be, and literally, it was Kobayashi was the guy that won it every year before that. We're decades removed from there being parody in the Nathan's hot dog eating contest.
And then they just like kicked Kobayashi out. I can't remember exactly the circumstances.
Oh, I read about it. He had a contract dispute, and then he like tried to stage his own protest, kind of.
And it backfired on him, I imagine. And now it's just a one-man sport, more or less. The unfortunate thing when you watch those competitions is all the other people that are not Joey Chestnut. Like they like Joey Chestnut's he's a freak of nature. He doesn't look like a guy who should be consuming that much food. He's in relatively decent shape. But most of the people that are in these competitions look like what you'd expect a competitive eater to look like. Yeah. They're larger. They're up there. They're laboring while they're doing these things. It just looks very painful. And it even looks painful when Joey Chestnut does it. He's beyond. I think he's more than a human being at this point. He's just like a human garbage disposal.
Well, it's interesting too because it's one of those things like how like golf used to be these guys that were all just like rich white dudes, and now there's so much money involved in it that these guys are training. They're probably taking steroids. They have these like dietitians, and they have these competitive eating used to be just like a fat guy could go out and eat a whole bunch of pie. There was like pie eating contests. And now it's like Joey Chestnut is doing these like stomach expansion exercises, and Kobayashi was doing that kind of stuff. And you kind of get to the point where, so I was reading about Kobayashi yesterday because I was wondering what he's up to. Does he still eat a lot? I don't know. I was interested to find out what's going on with Kobayashi.
Is this man still hungry?
is he still hungry? Is the Joey Chestnut legacy tainted by the fact that his greatest competitor has been banned from the sport, essentially? No, I don't think he was actually banned, by the way. I think he just, like, they had a mutual disagreement and it has led to him not competing. But my memory of Kobayashi was that I thought he had like some sort of stomach. This might still be true, by the way, but like a medical issue with his stomach that actually made his stomach larger. It was like he was like a medical anomaly. But what he also said was, if you have a bunch of fat on your body, it prevents your stomach, your actual physical stomach, not your belly, obviously, from expanding. So the science is there. And also, apparently, my stomach, the fat around my stomach is what's keeping me so thin. It turns out.
The whole thing is a medical anomaly when you think about competitive eating. It's like you have to be skinny so that your stomach can expand. But also, if you're eating that much, how can you possibly be skinny? It's just... You have to be like the exact right type of specimen to be able to be good at this. And Joey Chestnut is that man. Kobayashi was that man. And there's not many others. I mean, you can't name any other competitive eaters. Nobody can. Maybe somebody out there who's really into it can, or maybe because you just watched the annual competition that matters. But those are really the only two competitive eaters I know of. You know, I don't know. I would have to imagine there are no other household names out there. And of course, this always, the argument is always, are they athletes, or are they just like, you know, is this kind of like a walking freak show in some ways because of what they do? Is it like a magic trick almost, but with their human body?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I think that the argument for hot dog guys or competitive eaters is probably better than the argument for poker. It's probably a little bit worse than the argument for like figure skating, which I think requires a lot of athleticism. But anything that gets judged, I think I have a hard time with that being like a true sport. But yeah,
so you're out on figure skating.
I say figure skating requires a lot of athleticism. Even like fights that go to judges are a little bit wild to me. Because you're bringing in so much human error into the result of it. I mean, I want robot umps in all cases, right? I want robot referees to know. We got to find a measure
all across the board. Yeah,
yeah,
I would say most of those sports that require some sort of subjective grading system to declare a winner, they're always the ones that have corruption because they're the easiest to corrupt. So,
and luckily, sports like baseball have zero corruption. So it's
it's like, for me, it's still all athletics, but I totally understand why the sports themselves that require so much human intervention to succeed, that makes it tougher. It definitely makes it tougher to get behind sports like that when it's not easy to see as a impartial viewer to be able to see with your own eyes that somebody has won and somebody has lost and understand why. It's very hard to like really embrace what's going on in front of you.
Yeah, and so I would say that's like, if I was splitting hairs, that would be my opinion. Overall, I don't give a shit. Let's call it a sport. I like it being a sport. That's fine. Let's call them all sports.
They can all be sports. If cornhole is a sport now, then they're all sports.
Dude, do you remember? I remember mid-pandemic really getting going down the cornhole rabbit hole when there was no sports on, and that was like the only thing on ESPN. And you'd see these guys that would have like a mask on. They had to always worn incorrectly, by the way. They'd always have it down there, and the guy would have like a Yeti tumbler full of water that he had to have. He had to counterbalance the weight of the throw with a Yeti tumbler of water.
I will say the cornhole stuff, you can always find it on like ESPN2 on a random day. But during the pandemic was when those types of events really took off because they could still have them and there wasn't a whole lot for them to broadcast. So we actually saw that stuff. And you're right. They always had to wear the mask, but the people that were doing these cornhole, I mean, if you've ever seen the guys doing the cornhole competitions on ESPN, these are the people that might yell at you for wearing a mask and certainly wouldn't want to wear one themselves. And they are being forced to do it for, to abide by the rules of this competition.
Yeah,
and
competitive cornhole has very strict rules.
It would be like hanging off one ear and like barely dangling from their beard, and that counted. It was still considered on, so that mattered. And it's one of those things that like years from now, when you see a video from that time of somebody doing it, you'll be like, "What the hell was going on? What happened here?"
So I saw not to encroach on our local segment, but I saw it was either Bob Condata or Larry Stone tweeted a picture of a Mariners Safeco Field eating contest that I believe Kevin Shockey won.
Yeah,
that's fine. I don't remember how many he ate, but I remember the number being like respectable for someone who's not competing on a regular basis. I want to say it was like 14 or something like that.
It wasn't a ton. Kevin's one of my very best friends. He was a groomsman in my wedding. I've watched him eat some things, and you're just like, my God. And this is a man who's lost over 100 pounds in his life, and on top of that is still a good eater. But yeah, at the time he was a much bigger dude. Put down a lot of hot dogs. But
as we've learned, that was something that he was overcoming, not something that helped him being a bigger guy. Yeah. But my beef is not with, or my beef or what I'm marveling about is not Kevin Shockey eating that many. I also think it was Larry Stone maybe ate 2 and just didn't continue past that, which is a very funny way to do an eating contest.
Most of the guys, I think most of the guys were right around like 2 or 3.
My complaint is with Ryan Divish. Because as the tale of the tape read out, and I don't know if this is true, and I'm asking for your confirmation because it's another man that you're friends with. He's been to my house, by the way, but I would not call us friends, and I've never seen him eat. He had 5, and then a reversal of fortune, which is the funniest euphemism in sports of anything.
Yeah, and so he puked afterwards.
He puked after 5 hot dogs.
I don't think it's not the quantity that gets you. It's the velocity. It's the speed at which you're consuming the stuff. I would
hope that he had to have puked very early into the contest. Then.
But first of all, I've never had 5 hot dogs in one sitting ever. Right? Like,
you fucking coward! You fucking coward!
One sitting.
What is the point of cooking a couple dozen hot dogs if you're not?
I don't know for that competition. I'm not sure how big the hot dogs were. I think they were Mariner dogs, which are. I would say a Mariner dog is probably halfway between like a normal, like think of like a normal hot dog that you can get at any convenience store, right? And then think of like a Costco hot dog, which is like a hot dog on steroids. Yeah. The Mariner hot dogs at Safeco Field are about halfway in between the size of those.
Yeah, I wasn't dead naming Safeco Field. It was called Safeco Field at that time.
So they're pretty big hot dogs, I would say.
Yeah.
And if that's the ones they were using and you ate 5 of those, you would feel it. You would really feel it.
I'm putting an official challenge out. Ryan Divish, you and I race to 5 hot dogs. I'll cook them and race to 5 hot dogs.
I would love to see. I would love to watch this. I think this would be. I don't know what's going on with your YouTube channel, but I think this would help. Just 2 guys eating hot dogs.
Just a couple guys eating hot dogs. Maybe race to 6 so he can break his former record. We have the cameras. We could set up microphones. It could be a whole thing. We could film it at Bickerson's as long as they put a tarp out. By the way, Bickerson's July 29th is our next show. I will actually be hosting this one.
You're coming back.
I'm coming back. Headliner Scott Lassie. Opener not booked yet. So we'll figure out who that'll be. So you're where do you fall on? Are you consider it a sport or not a sport? We'll close on that because the hot dog eating.
Probably on the no side. I'm on the no side. And it's not, I think Joey Chestnut, you could call him an athlete. I think it's everybody else. We need more Joey Chestnuts out there. We need people to raise their game.
Is it? Yeah, that's kind of a thing that I'll make a distinction on is just because I don't consider something a sport doesn't mean that I don't consider the person who does it an athlete. I think the people that do figure skating are very obviously athletes. Whether or not I think it's a sport is another thing, but I don't necessarily consider unless the like Webster's definition of athlete is someone who participates in a sport, which maybe it is.
Might be.
Let's see. What is it is a person who is proficient in sports and other forms of physical exercise. So, and it was the Oxford Dictionary. We're
There you
trusting the
go.
Brits on this one.
All right. Where do we want to go here next?
Well, I guess I want to talk about the NBA free agency, and the draft is like somewhat interesting. The biggest piece of news in, I think, our world, because it's geographically close to us, but I think it's going to be an ongoing storyline. And I just kind of want to get a feel for it, because I've already actually put a bet on this. I have money on this. Is the Portland Trailblazers drafted a point guard, number 2 overall. There's already, prior to this offseason, there was speculation that Dame Lillard had played his last game in Portland. They draft, what is this guy's name?
Scoot Henderson.
Scoot Henderson. Good nickname. Scoot is a good nickname.
Yeah, he was it's one of those things where if Victor Wembanyama doesn't exist, Scoot Henderson could very easily have been the number 1 pick. Or Brandon Miller from Alabama. I mean, I think those guys went 2 and 3 right after Wembanyama. We're never going to get this
Victor.
right. I'm never going to. Victor W.
But
those I would say those 3 guys were, in any other year could, they could all be number 1 picks. So they ended up getting a pretty good guy by all accounts. But they have a point guard. That's the thing. The Blazers have had a point guard for a number of years now, and he's one of the best players in the NBA. Probably, I would say Damian Lillard is probably like one of the most underrated players in the NBA, just because of where he plays more than anything else. But he's a guy, I mean, I've always enjoyed watching him play. He's one of those guys that's, at this point, he's synonymous with Portland. He's synonymous with the West Coast because he's from Oakland, just like Gary Payton was back in the day. And those Oakland guys are built different, man, whether they're basketball players or football players like Marshawn Lynch. But you get an athlete out of Oakland and they give you 100%, man. And they seem to want it more for some reason. And Lillard certainly has been that throughout his career. So
I'm in a group chat of mostly guys who are like sports data guys or adjacent to sports data. Some of them are like literally founders of websites that deal with sports data. Yeah. Some of them are just friends of those guys, but a lot of them are based or they grew up in Oregon, grew up as Trailblazers fans. And I was giving him shit. I called him the Felix Hernandez of Portland, which I think is a pretty decent description. The only problem is he played in the playoffs many times.
Yeah. I mean, I assume what you're saying is he's just kind of like a star whose potential has been wasted by a franchise that wouldn't go all in, more or less.
Essentially, I mean, I think it's more difficult to go all in the NBA because there's only so much you can pay people, and they paid him as much as they could. I think it's just like the unfortunate reality of the NBA, at least as it has been through. I think there's maybe some changes in the most recent CBA that'll make it a little harder for teams to build these super teams, but there was never going to be a super team in Portland unless it was a bunch of European guys that loved craft coffee. Like that was the it's just not a great quality of life, probably, if you're like a mid-20s like professional athlete that wants to go to and frankly, like Portland's incredibly white and it's somewhat remote, and that's like not probably not a place to attract incredible NBA talent, right? I don't think Portland was really ever on the radar for LeBron or for Kevin Durant.
Yeah, Portland is very tough to get people to go to, and
I love Portland. To be clear, I love the city of Portland.
Yeah, I would give the Trailblazers credit. I mean, basically the story is after this draft happens, Damian Lillard decides, hey, clearly you guys are moving in a different direction. I'm 31, 32 years old. It's time for me to go pursue a championship with a real contender. And he requests a trade. And he, clearly he spent some time thinking about this. I think no player has exhibited as much love for the city in which they play, as Damian Lillard has. He clearly loves to be in Portland. He's seemingly enjoyed his time there. He's re-upped with them before. I mean, he wants to be there, but it's really tough, man, when you're an NBA player or really in any sport, and it's clear that the team you play for is not as committed to winning as maybe you are at this point in your life.
Right.
You don't really have a lot of options, right? Like you have to you can either stay there and just deal with it and understand that, like, hey, I might not get a chance to be playing for a championship until I'm at the very tail end of this career, if I even make it there, right? Or I have to go somewhere else. I have to. Yeah. And it became easy for Lillard to request that trade, and now there's a bunch of teams that, of course, want his services. He's one of the best point guards you'll find. But it's unfortunate because I feel like you don't see a lot of guys that are like one-town superstars in any sport anymore that'll stay. And often, when guys leave, it's because they're looking for a payday or, something else. In this case, he's one of those guys that wants to go maybe pursue a championship or at least a real chance at going deep into the playoffs. And I'll give the Blazers credit. Over the years, they've tried, they've really tried. I feel like they've done about as well as they can do. Everything you said about it being difficult to attract people to Portland, I think that's very accurate. That's their only major sports team, right, is the Blazers. So you don't even have the distraction of other teams. Like, at least, if you're, obviously we don't have a basketball team in Seattle, but if you're a Seattle Mariner, right, there's the Kraken, there are the Seahawks, there's a major college program, a Division I college team that you can go watch, all in this town, right? So there's things for you to do. You really just have to love the area and be okay with like the amount of travel that you'll have to be attracted to a town like Seattle or like Portland.
Even more challenging than Seattle because Portland does the Portland airport. I know this from having tried to figure out how to fly out of there. It has very few direct flights that the Seattle Tacoma, the SeaTac airport doesn't have, and it's missing a lot of direct flights.
Yeah.
So there's if you live somewhere else, there's an even stronger chance you're going to have to do a connecting flight if you want to get back to see your family or something like that. And that's tough. And that's not even to like, that's just the part where it's in a remote location. I think that for the NBA specifically, which happens to be their only professional sport, it's like, it's just so fucking white. It is.
Portland's got to be. It's got to be one of the whitest cities.
Outside of Utah, it's got to be the whitest NBA city. Like it's outside of Salt Lake City, it's got to be the whitest NBA city.
OKC could be up there.
I don't think so. OKC is pretty diverse. I think.
You think it's more diverse than Portland? Yeah.
Portland's
tough.
We'll put the numbers in the. We're not going to do that. I'm not going to. I will after this refute and send you a personal text message, but I'm not following up with the audience of this podcast at all. I do think I've been to Oklahoma City a bunch of times for comedy, and it's significantly more diverse than Portland is.
Yeah, Portland is tough, man. It's interesting to see. I've never. Our entire lives, Portland has never done much of anything. No knock on them. That in the early '90s, they had some really good teams. They went to the finals. They lost to Jordan. They were one of the teams that got the right to lose to Michael Jordan's Bulls, right? They've had opportunities for sure, but they just never seem like a serious contender. They just never do. They kind of they got lucky.
Didn't they win the year before the Sonics did, like 78?
Yeah, way back in the day, back when they had some good players back then, and it was I would say it was a different landscape back then.
For sure.
One of the things that's kind of like changed the way people view the world is like social media, right? And so there's so many places now that you would want to go to, you would want to play a sport in a city like Las Vegas because you see people on Instagram posting about Las Vegas all the time, right? Because it's a cool place to like take a picture, say that you live there, right? No one says that about Portland.
By the way, you might be the only person that wants to live in Vegas. I think you do secretly want to live in Vegas.
I would totally live there. Yeah, I'm just saying, like any city that's like picturesque or has something about it that makes it unique. Like those are coveted destinations through what we see on the internet now. And I don't think a lot of people would consider Portland one of those places. I'm sure people in Portland would say it is, but it's just not. And I would even say probably to some degree, like, places like Seattle are not like, there's certain cities that NBA players or any pro athlete are really going to want to go to. Portland's not one of those cities. Seattle might be for some athletes, but Portland certainly is not for an NBA player. I can't imagine.
Yeah, I think that Seattle grows on athletes. And I think
Yes.
like one of the Legion of Boom or those 95 Mariners teams, like a lot of those guys still live in Seattle. And that's a testament, I think, to those guys who are, none of them are Seattle natives, sticking around. And then a lot of Seattle natives stick around too. The Brandon Roys, Will Conroys, Isaiah Thomases of the world, they stick around. But yeah, it's like, I guess if you play for the Atlanta Hawks, which is not a storied franchise, I think is probably less storied than the Portland Trailblazers, probably. If you go to Atlanta, like your nightlife options as a mid-20s black dude have to be significantly better than like what I'm going to go to a vegan strip club and like a craft beer bar, which to me sounds fantastic, Alex, but I am not an NBA player, okay?
I will say Portland is the strip club capital of the U.S. They have more strip clubs per capita than
Sure.
any place
I've been
in
to
the
an
US.
Atlanta strip club. The experience is
I
significantly
understand.
different.
Atlanta is also like one of the strip club
Yes.
capitals of the U.S.
The birthplace of lemon pepper wings is in strip clubs. Just two wonderful things converging into the same place.
Yeah.
I'm a complete fraud. I haven't been to a strip club in years. I have been to it. Oh shit! I almost dropped the whole table on that one. I have been to an Atlanta strip club, but it's been over a decade since I've been to a strip club.
Yeah, you don't ever want to be like too close with guys who are strip club guys. That's not. That's not a good thing.
I remember we went to the strip club the last day you could smoke indoors and just really ruin some lungs of strippers.
Wow.
Because I believe I was not 21 yet. So that was in Washington
That's a throwback.
State.
I mean, it's been a long time since.
Yeah. Yeah. Smoke indoors, could not go to a bar. So we went to a strip club.
Wow.
And just chain smoke cigarettes in the faces of these.
I'm sure they love that.
They
That
had
was
to have.
Very endearing.
All right. Well, I guess you've weaseled your way out of talking about affirmative action.
We went so long on the other things. We got to get to our local topic too.
Yeah,
because it is a really big week for baseball in the Seattle area. It's All-Star Week, man.
So it's All-Star Week. It's overpriced tickets. I would have considered being involved in All-Star Week in some way, going to one of the events, but I went and knocked my wife up with the expectation this kid would be born basically All-Star Weekend. She comes out 3 weeks early, which just leaves me full of regrets because I'm not going to any of the events. Are you going to any of the events?
I am going to some events, yes. Originally, we bought tickets for the Home Run Derby, which the Home Run Derby, I think, is like, that's the real event.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
the actual All-Star game is never that exciting unless you just want to watch, your favorite player go up there for an at-bat or two. That's about it. Or see
well, it
the
also
best
used to be
pitchers in the game
exciting
pitch.
to see like National League pitchers, and now there's interleague play and so much movement in free agency that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, it used to be that you didn't have access to watching any team across the country, right? You could only see your local team or any kind of nationally broadcast game. You didn't get to see the best players play. You certainly didn't get to see players from the other league compete. So now that interleague exists, the novelty of the All-Star game is really just about, hey, do you want to see the best player, iron sharpens iron kind of thing? Do you want to see the best player face the other best player? So that part is kind of cool, but the game itself has never, for me, been like that exciting. The Derby is always cool, though. I mean, that's the one event that you can always watch. So we got tickets to that. And then we got tickets to the Saturday event because I like the celebrity softball game.
That's fun.
I like watching celebrities play softball. It's funny to me.
Yeah.
But it also comes with the ticket is for the softball game and the Futures game. So the Futures game is cool.
Pretty cool.
As a baseball nerd, I like watching the up and coming prospects. So that'll be cool to see those things. And then just like the fan fest festivities that they have at these things are, out of this world. So it'll be cool to just kind of like explore that. And we actually went in the last couple of days, sold our Home Run Derby tickets.
Boy.
Yeah. The more we thought about it, it was like trying to go there twice in a couple of days with how chaotic it'll be. Like that Saturday will be pretty chill by comparison. There's not a lot of people that are going to want to go see the Futures game and the softball game. That was actually that's a $25 ticket for that event. So if you are somebody out there who wants to go to one of these events, but doesn't want to spend a couple $100 for a ticket, go to the Saturday event. So it'll be like a really nice, easy way to kind of just be a part of it all and not have to break the bank. But the Derby tickets that we had bought were $250 a piece. The actual game tickets are more than that, which is crazy. 250, but we ended up selling them and like doubling our money because somebody wanted to go a lot more than we did.
Yeah, I just my friend just bought some through a source where he's getting them at basically face value. They're nice. They're good home run derby. It's a good place. $500 a piece though.
Yeah,
which is just it's so predatory.
It really is, man. It really, you know, you always see people that get mad at other fans for like selling tickets or profiting off the tickets, but I totally understand it in this case. If you're paying $500 for a pair of seats to go to something, and you know maybe you just don't want to, you want that money back, you want to recoup that money, or you want to make money off it, totally your right to do that. I mean, I've always been in support of like the capitalistic market of ticket sales where the buyers are concerned, right? Not the companies that like actually jack these prices up on people.
Not StubHub,
but if you're look, I mean, there's one way to offset your costs to go into these games. If you need 2 tickets, you could have bought 4, you could have sold 2, doubled your money, basically been going to this thing for very little. So I totally understand why people do it, because it's just kind of the way of the world now. Yeah.
So anyways, this is all going on. It's an exciting time. And then the Mariners had a stretch. So this is what I don't understand, I guess, is so the Mariners had a stretch of like a brief stretch of bad baseball last week. And it's the first time this year and the first time maybe in a couple years where I've seen the fan base like in a full-on meltdown on Twitter, because in most of these years, in the last 20 plus years, there hasn't been any expectation that the team was going to be good. So it doesn't really justify a meltdown if the team was always going to be bad and they're playing bad. Obviously, they make the playoffs last year, and it's kind of it doesn't even really feel like fully getting off because it's the first year of the 5-team playoffs, and it doesn't feel like getting off the schneid of the since 2001 thing completely. Going into this year, there's a lot of optimism, obviously, and they've been mediocre, which is what they were last year through this. Like at this point, it's what I think any Mariners fan at this point kind of has to expect. So it seemed like a very acute reaction to me to basically the status quo outcome that we've gotten used to. Why was it so pronounced last week?
Well, I mean, they were losing games in epic fashion. I mean, I guess it kind of it ended with a loss to the Rays last Friday, where the Mariners were up a few runs. They were up 4-0, right? 4 runs in the second, pretty big inning. People are excited. The Rays are the best team in baseball. The Rays slowly chip away. They come back. They tie the game at 4. The game's still tied at 4 in the 8th. And then the Mariners relinquish 11 runs. And all of a sudden it's 15-4. So they're dropping the game in dramatic fashion. Prior to that, they lose a series to the Washington Nationals, who are basically running a AAA lineup out. I mean, they're not trying at all. And then before that, they were just kind of like scuffling with some of the teams they were playing. I mean, it's one of those things where, you know, I guess in recent days they've come back. They've won a few games. They actually have a chance to sweep a series against the Giants here coming up. They end up taking 2 of 3 from the Rays, so that's a huge series win. So now they're at least at this point, as we're recording this, they have 2 series wins in their pockets since this bad week of baseball.
They're sitting at 500 as of right now.
They're at 500. I mean, I think this is what this team is. You know, I don't think they're much better than 500, and I don't think they're much worse. But the way that they get to that 500 is excruciating, right? Like, it's never like you would think. Like if you think about a 500 team, you'd think, okay, they win one, then they lose one, then they win one, then they lose one. It's like if you actually go through an entire season like that, it doesn't feel terrible, right? Because every other day as a fan, you're still seeing a win, right? You're still seeing a win every other day. The Mariners tend to do it in streaks. So it's like they will go on this run where they take 2 of 3 from teams for 2 straight weeks, and you're feeling great. You're like, man, if they can just build upon this, they could really be onto something. They might be much better than a 500 team. And then they have another 2-week stretch where they lose 2 of 3 to every team. And that's how they get to their 500. And it's just painful to watch, because when they're in one of these lulls where they're not winning games, you know, oftentimes it feels like they should be, right? Like you shouldn't be losing a series to this year's Washington Nationals. That should not happen. There are not many teams that have that have dropped entire series to the Nationals, and the Mariners go out and do that. And it's just like, how are you doing this? And then when they go through these streaks where they're losing, typically what's been hurting them is they're just not scoring any runs. And that's a broken record with the Mariners. I mean, we've seen that as Mariner fans for our, since the 90s, basically, since the end of the Griffey, Buhner, Martinez, A-Rod Mariners. The offense has been a real problem. And so to see that again, especially after an offseason in which they really didn't sign anybody to help the offense, it's just,
sure,
they're disappointing a lot of people, and I understand why.
So one mistake, one correction. They were the 5th seed of a 16 playoff. But
That's
again,
right.
my point remains where it wasn't the 4-team, 1 wild card playoffs that they made it into. It was expanded playoffs, which doesn't feel like they actually ever really exercised the demon that's been with them since 2001. I also think like this is kind of a thing. I don't think you're very emotional online, which is something I really like about you. But
it doesn't usually pay off, man. I've seen people that are just pure emotion online all the time, and you're like, this is exhausting.
Yes, fully agree. And I have friends who I'm like, you've been a Mariners fan. Like, there's people who I know have been Mariners fans for like decades that I'm like, how can you keep this energy up? Like, it's got to be it just means to me the sports viewing experience has to be horrible for that person if this is their reaction to a mid-season bad week of Mariners baseball. They have to have been on the verge of suicide for decades.
It's really funny because Mariner fans, the energy that they display online, I don't think it mirrors reality, really.
Sure.
I mean, I think, everybody's energy online is so much different than they are in real life. But with Mariner fans, I mean, they get so angry about everything online, right? Like, but they would never, I don't think, if you happen to catch them after a game out at a bar, I think they would have a much more normal reaction to what they had just witnessed. But man, when they get on their phones and start typing up a tweet, it's pure anger. And as somebody who does discuss the Mariners online quite a bit, usually making jokes at their expense or just, commenting on what's going on around me, I'll see it. There's a lot of people that'll just like, I'll say something and it'll make them incensed.
Yeah.
And then you have to start to wonder, like, are these people okay? Like, are they mentally all there? They probably are. They're just, they're using social media as a vehicle to vent. And I get it, man. I think the one thing I will always have sympathy, I guess in some ways empathy with Mariner fans, all Mariner fans, is just how frustrating it can be to be a fan of a team that feels like it's not pursuant of the goals that teams should be pursuant of, right? Like,
sure.
The idea of having a sports franchise is that they are competing to be the best. They're competing to be a champion. And you want to see, as a fan of any team,
that's
you want
the
to see
idea
that.
of being a fan of a sports franchise,
Right.
but not necessarily the idea of being a sports franchise, which is the conflict between the owners and the fans all the time, right?
Well, I mean, for an owner, a lot of owners want what the fans want, right? They want a championship, but a lot of owners just want to make money. I mean, and
Right.
probably, if even the most passionate owners of any sports franchise are probably 51% want to make money. Like their internal conflict is 51% we got to make money and 49% we got to win a championship, right? Because at the end of the day, if they're losing money, then these are guys that are not trying to invest in anything that loses them money. They became billionaires for a reason, right?
Well, and especially because it's funny to talk about the class of the ultra rich, and now this is like the ultra of the ultra rich. You always had to be very rich to own a sports franchise, and now you have to be in a class that's like means that you've probably got a lot of. It's kind of like how the soul's been sucked out of All-Star games and the Super Bowl and shit like that in the name of capitalism. Also, like, it's really, really rare that an owner has some sort of connection to the team winning. That, like, Paul Allen was a rare example. Jerry Jones, as much as we make fun of him and as stupid as a lot of the decisions he makes are, for a guy to still own a franchise that really, really cares if they win a Super Bowl, that's what he wants more than anything.
Yeah.
I think it's incredibly rare. And though I think Jerry Jones has a million reasons to hate him, for that reason, I think Cowboys fans should feel lucky that he's here or that he's there. And I think that the Mariners fan base is just like, it's just unrealistic to think that. I don't actually think that's what franchises want all that often, is to like win at all costs.
Yeah, I mean, it's just on a general level with sports as a whole. It, as a fan, it sucks that there are like millions of you or thousands of you as fans, and ultimately one person who dictates what the team you're a fan of does. Right? It all comes down to what the majority owner wants at the end of the day. They call all the shots, even if they've delegated responsibilities to general managers, front office team members, things like that. Ultimately, it comes down to what they want. And that's always going to, like, that's a reality that as a fan you have to come to grips with. I don't think a lot of fans do come to grips with that, and that's why they get so upset in situations like this. I mean, the Mariners have an owner that he's not as rich as the other owners in baseball. He's just not. I mean, there are wealthier ownership groups out there, and he's kind of the victim of their past history. I mean, they've never been winners, and this guy has been there for a long time, even though he wasn't the majority owner, until the recent past. He's become kind of the figurehead of these past regimes that still failed, right?
And the thing that he's facing that other owners are not is it was basically an absentee ownership group. Like, there was no face of the franchise in the ownership group until him. And so now he's like, I think he's probably catching strays from the previous ownership group not being very visible.
Right.
Now he's getting decades of frustration despite not owning.
Oh, absolutely. And John Stanton, I would say, like, a lot of people would probably want to paint him as a bad owner, and a lot of people there's probably actually people out there who would want to paint him as a good owner. I think he's probably like the most average owner. I think he's like the median of sports franchise owners. Like, I know he's a fan. I've seen him at games, and he'll actually bring a scorebook and keep score. So this guy is a legitimate baseball fan. That doesn't mean that he's good at what he's doing. It just means he's a fan, right? Like, just because you're successful in business, whatever field of business you might be in. I think for him, it was all telecommunications. He basically started T-Mobile, right? He's good at that. That doesn't mean he's good at running a baseball organization.
Right.
And, so far it's been a struggle, and it's really hard to tell. Like, is it that Stanton happens to employ the wrong people to go out and sign free agents or make the right moves to build a winner? Or is it that he doesn't want to spend money to pay those guys to come here? We don't really know. That's not anything that you'll ever really know. You don't know how much of a billionaire's fortune that billionaire is willing to spend, right? So those are all things you have to keep in mind as a fan. I mean, it's the unfortunate reality of sports ownership in general is that a lot of these guys, to get to that level of wealth and business acumen, you're not a normal person. You can't be. There's just I know a lot of people out there think like, hey, this guy could be just like me, or I could be just like this guy. No, I mean, you can't. These guys are insane. They get like no sleep. They're probably more type A than you could ever fathom,
I want to say it's like 1% of people are clinical psychopaths, and like 4% of CEOs are clinical psychopaths.
Yeah. No, I mean, you have to be. You have to be to want to get to that level. And I get it. Some of these guys are silver spoons, and, they were born into wealth, and they were able to maximize the wealth they were born into to become even wealthier. But the reality is, whether they are old money or new money, a lot of them, because of the way they've lived their lives up to this point, they're out of touch. They don't really understand. They're not going to think like you as a fan, because you've led a pretty normal life that, relates to most people out there, and they have not. They just haven't. And that's not to give any kind of pass to John Stanton or any owner out there. I think it's your duty as somebody in that position to start to understand people, understand what fans want, understand what it takes to be a good owner and create a good franchise. I don't know that John Stanton has done all that work, man. I think he might be paying for the sins of the Mariners of the past, but it's on him to create, a better future for this team. And so far, people haven't seen that from him. So there's just a lot to be upset about. And like you said, I mean, last year they built up all these expectations going to the playoffs, and then They did nothing in the offseason to improve upon that. And so far, the results that they've put together in the first half of this season have not proven that they've done much to build up upon last year's success.
All right, you want to play the home run game?
Let's do it.
You want to go first or second?
I'll go first. I got a guy. I pulled up a guy here while we were talking earlier, and I found one that, he's dead.
Great.
Died young, but I think this guy
Even better.
Yeah, this guy might be the poster child of the steroid era.
Hold on. Can I guess who it is? Because I almost picked this guy.
If you want to do a blind guess, go for it. If you want do a blind guess first.
Blind guess is Ken Caminiti.
Yes, you got
it.
Yes,
I almost picked him for you. That's
this
so
is a good one. Yeah, I didn't even need to give you the clues, but I'll give you the bio on Ken Caminiti. He had did you look up his numbers?
I did not. No.
Okay, good. Okay, so you didn't. So you don't have any.
No, I would. Yeah, I would let you know if I had.
All right. Yeah. So he plays 15 years in the majors. I mean, he played the entire 90s. I remember this guy. He was a national leaguer, so we didn't get to see him much back then, but. He had some pretty productive seasons, 15 years, mostly with Houston and the Padres. And then at the end of his career, he plays for Texas and for Atlanta. Plays from 87 to 2001. So literally spans the entire steroid era. It's like 87 is like when Canseco and McGuire were bulking up, and 01 is when they're starting to crack down. So this man, he
was the whistleblower. He was like the first whistleblower that was like, everybody's doing this. He said, do you remember he said 75% of players are using steroids? And we were like, this guy's so full of shit. Pitchers don't use steroids. And then we find out pitchers probably use them as much as anybody, if not more.
Everybody was using steroids. Ken Caminiti blew the cover off the thing.
Yeah.
And then a few years later, he passes away at a very young age.
And I want to say it was like a brain tumor that I believe he attributed to, or people have attributed to, his use of performance enhancing drugs, be they steroids or like human growth hormone, which is a similar fate to what I think a lot of people think Lyle Alzado succumbed to.
That's a very noble story of how someone could die. But that's not how Ken Caminiti died. Ken Caminiti died of a cocaine and heroin drug overdose.
Fuck. Yeah. I guess Lyle Alzado is who I was conflating the story with. Attaboy, Kenny.
Ken, maybe he died doing what he loved. I don't know. It seems like maybe that was what he loved, yes.
Do you think it's like, because you get an IV, I've seen an IV put in recently, maybe you just throw something fun in there, like it started out as steroids and then cocaine and heroin?
Yeah, he was troubled. I mean, it was pretty clear he was a troubled player, but while he was playing, very good ball player. So like I said, 15 years in the bigs, 87 to 01. And I'm going to let you guess a number now.
Okay. So I think Ken Caminiti maybe won an MVP one year, or got very close to winning an MVP. But it was most of his career is in the 90s, which the late 90s are the big years where we start to see the big inflated home run numbers. But I don't think Caminiti was the beneficiary of that. My guess is he never crossed 50 home runs, maybe crossed 40 home runs twice. I think he's a 25 to 30 home run guy in an average year. Played, whatever, we'll do the math. You cut the shit off the beginning and the end. I'm going 340 home runs.
Wow. Not great.
Fuck me in the ass.
You're off by 101.
Damn.
239.
Okay.
239 was his number. And you were right, though. I mean, your process in getting there was correct. He did win an MVP. So 1996, he's the NL MVP.
Which is maybe a Padres World Series year also?
I think the next year was the year they got to the series. Yeah, 97, I feel like. Maybe even 98. But in 96, he wins the MVP. It's 40 home runs, which is a career high for him in a season. So you're right. He never even gets to 30 in another season. The drugs really kicked in that year. And his next highest total in 98, he has 29 home runs. In 97 and 95, he has 26 home runs. Those are the only 4 seasons he gets over 20. Most years he's double digits, but he's in the teens. So yeah, I mean, he's one of those guys that when he hit his prime, you knew it. He had 4 really good seasons, and then from there, I mean, this just speaks to the steroid era and the fact that he was definitely doing it. I mean, you think like now if a guy is 31, 32, he's kind of considered older on the downside of his career, and you see a decline. His best season, 96, he's 33 years old. So
Right.
his 4 good seasons are from like age 32 to 35.
Yeah, we saw a lot of that in those years.
Yeah, back then it was like guys were having these like late career rebirths. Now it's like 35, and the current version of Major League Baseball is like a death sentence. They're putting you out to pasture at this point. So yeah, he overall though, pretty good career. 3-time All-Star. Career WAR of 33.4, which honestly, like, he was kind of nondescript until he had those 4 good seasons. So yeah, but solid player overall. Good third baseman.
All right, I have one for you. Okay. Another guy who I'm calling a slight audible. I had a different guy in, but a guy who I've had in the potential hopper for a while, and a guy who definitely succeeded through the steroid era. Luis Gonzalez.
Okay.
Who plays,
I have his autograph somewhere. I have his autograph.
All right. He plays good guy. He plays 19 seasons. He starts his career with Houston. He plays I think his most notable seasons are with the Arizona Diamondbacks. He also played with the Chicago Cubs, the Dodgers, the Marlins, and the Tigers at different points. And also the author of one of the most dramatic victories after 9/11, after baseball gets delayed for a week. He steals a poetic victory from the New York Yankees. That it was probably the only time I think many people in this country were rooting for the Yankees. And somehow we didn't hate Luis Gonzalez for hitting the game. Was that game winning, or did that blow was that game
Pretty
tying?
sure that was a game winning hit off Mariano Rivera.
Yeah.
It's that chopper back up the middle.
Yeah.
That finds, it's the type of hit now that would register nothing on an exit velo meter.
Sure.
And somehow that's enough to get the winning run home, and the Diamondbacks win the World Series.
Was it a chopper? My memory is that it's like a blooper, but I could be wrong.
I think it was a chopper. I think he pounded it into the ground and it just found its way up the middle, because I'm pretty sure they were playing on the turf in Arizona at the time.
Okay.
I think. But regardless of how it happened, it's a game-winning hit in the World Series, and he is a World Series champion as a result of all of that.
Yeah. Tony Womack on those teams I'm now seeing.
Tony Womack, good second baseman.
Hold on. We'll briefly to just really close this gap. And I actually have not seen what the results are, but we can watch this play, which for a lot of people is going to be the first time they've ever seen this and didn't know it existed. Am I sharing my screen right now?
I can see it. Yes.
All right. I wonder if you might not get sound, but that's probably actually better. Oh shit. I think I just showed you I might have just showed.
No, I didn't see see anything from Baseball Reference.
Okay. All right. No, I think I'm just sharing this tab. Luckily. It was a little blooper.
It was a blooper, yeah. Okay.
All right. But
and it's a blooper that they were playing everybody in. So the Yankees are playing everyone in to cut off the run at home. But if they were playing at normal depth, the shortstop probably catches that on the fly.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that just happened to bite the old Yankees. But you know what? They didn't need it. They got plenty.
They have plenty.
Okay. Luis Gonzalez, 19 years. A few things I remember about Luis Gonzalez. He had a slow start to his career.
Mm-hmm.
I know the first few years, I think he's like in Houston a little bit early on, and then he kind of goes on a little bit of a journey before he ultimately kind of settles in with the Diamondbacks. And I think he actually had like some decent seasons maybe with the Tigers before that, but he didn't come onto the radar until, probably the second half of his career. So early on, he's probably not playing a ton. He's also not like, I remember he could be a home run hitter at times. Like he might've been in a couple derbies even, but he's not a guy, like if you look at him, he's like a rail. He's not very big. He's kind of skinny. And he played for so many teams that were like not great or like just not highly visible teams that you don't remember him hitting a ton of home runs. But if he had hit 20 a year for 19 seasons, he'd be right at about 380. I would imagine there's probably some seasons where he's like getting up close to 40. There's also probably a lot of those seasons where he's like barely scraping the surface of like 10 because he's just not getting the playing time early on. So this is tough because he probably has some real volatile seasons in there. So if I estimate that he averaged 20 a year, which might be a little high, then he's at 380. So I'm going to say like 335.
I mean, very upsetting. 354, but I'm going to tell you that I think your process actually failed and somehow got you back to the right place because he had one season, the 2001 season, he hit 57 home runs.
Yeah, that's right. I do remember there were a couple seasons where he really like went off.
Yeah, but he only had 30 home runs the prior season, 2000, and then never crossed the 30 home run threshold, which is what I was hoping. I was hoping you'd extend that peak a little bit in your mind.
Yeah, I just remember he was so volatile because like he was not even a regular player for the first few years of his career. And then he had 87 home runs in 2 seasons. I mean, that's a huge percentage of his total career home runs without trying to do the math real fast. Huge percentage of his career home runs. So, but I knew he probably averaged around 20-ish, which ultimately I guess that's more or less dead on.
Yeah. This guy, 2001, which is obviously 2001, I think is the Barry Bonds 73 year, maybe. No, that was 2003, I think. But it's one of the big Bonds years, I believe, and maybe even a Sosa and McGuire year.
Yeah, but he's definitely caught right in the middle of that era where 50 plus home runs is forgettable. It just is. 2001,
57 home runs. He hits 325, 429, 688, good for a 1,117 OPS.
That's insane. That's a really good
he was third in the MVP voting.
Yeah.
Behind Sammy Sosa and Barry Bonds.
Yeah.
It was the 73 that was the 73 home run season for Barry Bonds.
Yeah, you're not going to take an MVP from a guy who sets an all-time record for home runs, even if he is on roids. Luis Gonzalez is one of those guys that you could just look at him and be like, I don't think that guy's on steroids.
Dude, I don't know, man. He's got the Brady Anderson thing where we all just assume Brady Anderson did steroids for 1 year. And Luis Gonzalez had one of those swings where you'd see him hit a home run and it was so easy. And it was like it seemed like he pulled everything like perfectly into the right field bleachers. You're like, I could hit home runs. If that guy could hit home runs, I could hit home runs.
I think he was in the home run derby in 2001 at Safeco Field. I'm pretty sure he was.
Right, yeah. And maybe won it?
He might have won it, yeah. He had a couple good years. He was always a really good ball player. I think Luis Gonzalez is another one of those guys that is like a highly underrated player just because of the competition around him, really. All those guys with the inflated numbers. But he was good. The fact that his OPS was as high as it was and I'm sure a lot of other seasons, even when he's not hitting 57 bombs, he still probably got a pretty good OPS because he was just a good, solid all-around player.
Yep, he did win the 2001 Home Run Derby, 16 home runs. Who was the guy that really changed? Man, remember Garrett Anderson? He pops up on this list.
Yeah, well, that's a good guy for the home run game. I feel.
Yeah,
like.
we should. We should not look it up.
don't look it up. Whoever gets to it first gets to
it. But yeah, the Luis Gonzalez had a career that's like really on the verge of Hall of Fame, but I don't think is a Hall of Famer.
He's a first ballot Hall of Very Good.
Yes,
first ballot. No doubt about it. He is.
We got to contact those people and see if they're doing anything with that name anymore because it's just such a good name.
Yeah, no, it is, and it's a fun game to play. Guys like that you can remember their careers as being like pretty good, but also very nondescript. It's easy to forget that Luis Gonzalez ever existed at times, and then other times you think about it and you're like, yeah, man, that guy was really, really good for a few years.
Yeah, it's funny. He's a guy you can forget completely who won a home run derby, who had a walk-off hit in an
iconic World Series hit. Yeah. Yeah. There's just not a ton of there's not a lot of players that have authored those moments, and he's one of those guys. But again, it's the Diamondbacks. Diamondbacks in their 5th year of existence at most at that point. So it's
that's what's so remarkable about how pervasive Griffey was. Is I'll talk to people who I'm like, of course you and I grew up loving Griffey.
Yeah.
Like but he's from our city. But
Yeah.
I'll talk to people from fucking Kansas that are like, oh yeah, my favorite player ever is Ken Griffey Jr. And it's not, if they're our age,
Yeah.
it's everybody. Like he was the Michael Jordan of baseball, just without the like postseason success, but he was the guy.
I have a buddy from Buffalo who's about our age, and he said growing up, a lot of his friends' favorite team was the Mariners,
Right.
which is crazy. You know, you're 3,000 miles away. You probably don't even get to watch any Mariners games. Like if you did, it'd be up like way past your bedtime. Most instances.
That's really true.
And their favorite team was the Mariners because of Ken Griffey Jr., you know, because you see him everywhere. I mean, I remember like when I was a kid, when we were kids, I was a fan of the Charlotte Hornets, having never watched a Charlotte Hornets game, because they had great marketing for like likable young players, Larry Johnson, Alonzo Mourning, Kendall Gill. Yeah, their jerseys, like there's certain colors that you'll gravitate to, and like they had like those light blue jerseys that were.
If the 90s wasn't a turquoise, the whole decade is turquoise. Turquoise and purple.
It is. It's like those bright colors you don't see a lot of. I think that was probably another appeal of the Mariners, is that when they had the teal jerseys, like if you're a Griffey fan and you see that teal jersey, it might resonate with you a little bit. And then the backwards cap and everything. Like
he was fun. He was one of the most fun guys to watch. Beautiful swing. Played the game in a way that was fun to watch. And it's just amazing that guy could have that level of impact on baseball from Seattle. And that's a Seattle that's like has not made the playoffs, basically. A team that had not made the playoffs.
They really haven't built on that popularity much. No. It's crazy. I mean, they have these generational players. I mean, Ichiro's another one. Like they go basically from Griffey to Ichiro with only like a 1 year gap in between. They have these transcendent players that are known the world around. Two of the most popular athletes in the world. Like even if you don't like baseball, you probably know who Ichiro is. And even if his popularity was just relegated to the U.S., it'd be massive. But obviously, he's bigger overseas than he is here.
Yeah,
and they just can't win. It doesn't make any sense. Like,
all right, I guess the fans are right, Alex. God damn.
It's like if the Bulls had never won anything with Michael Jordan, you'd be like, "What the hell happened here?"
Yeah, I know. All right, I think that's the end of the podcast.
All right, thanks for listening. We'll be back next week. We don't foresee any kids being born in the next few days. So
good God, I hope not.
We'll see you soon.
All right. DKC McLean everywhere. Alex SSN. Only on Twitter. Bye. All right. I'll at least end the recording here and then.
All right.